The sound that shattered him wasn't the rush of traffic or the hum of the city waking up, it was the hollow thud of a white cane slipping from trembling fingers and striking concrete, followed by a soft gasp that sounded like someone realizing, too late, that no one was coming back for them. In the sharp daylight of a late morning, at a lonely bus stop smeared with dust and old rain marks, a blind girl sat alone, her face tilted toward the sun as if hoping it might explain why she had been left there like forgotten luggage. If you're watching Ripple of Love and you believe in hope, compassion, and second chances, take a moment right now to like, comment, share, and subscribe, because stories like this exist to remind us that kindness still matters. Ryan Cole had not planned to stop. He never planned anything anymore beyond surviving the day. The weight of single fatherhood pressed into his spine like a permanent ache, a quiet punishment for a life that had once been full and then abruptly emptied. He drove a dented silver van that smelled faintly of cleaning solution and old fries, tools rattling in the back from the handyman jobs that barely paid the bills. The sun hung high and merciless, lighting up every crack in the pavement and every line on his tired face as he slowed near the bus stop, his eyes catching on the girl as if pulled by an invisible thread. She couldn't have been more than 20, her clothes thin and worn, a faded green dress that had been washed too many times, clinging awkwardly as if it didn't belong to her anymore. Her hair was damp with sweat, strands sticking to her cheeks, and a black cloth was tied gently but firmly over her eyes, not in cruelty but necessity, the way some blind people shielded themselves from light they could no longer process. She sat rigid, hands folded in her lap, posture too careful, like someone trying not to take up space in a world that had already decided she was an inconvenience. Ryan felt something twist in his chest, a sensation he usually ignored because acknowledging it made the days harder. He had learned to keep moving, to avoid looking too long at pain that wasn't his. But the image of her, alone in broad daylight, hit a nerve he thought had gone numb years ago. It reminded him of mornings after his wife died, when his daughter Mara would sit on the edge of her bed, waiting quietly, afraid to ask why her mother wasn't coming back. He pulled over without thinking, gravel crunching beneath the tires. The heat pressed down, the air thick with the smell of exhaust and dry grass. As he stepped out, he noticed details others might miss, the way her fingers trembled as she reached for the cane that had rolled just out of reach, the way her lips moved silently, counting breaths, anchoring herself against panic. Ryan approached slowly, heart pounding, not wanting to startle her. He felt clumsy, unsure of his place, afraid of doing the wrong thing. His life had become a series of wrong turns since the accident that took his wife, a constant fear of failing the one person who depended on him. Helping a stranger felt dangerous in a different way, it meant opening a door he had kept locked for too long. The bus stop itself seemed abandoned by time. Peeling paint flaked from the bench, old flyers curled at the edges, advertising events long past. Cars passed without slowing, drivers wrapped in their own concerns, the girl invisible to them despite sitting in plain sight. Ryan felt anger simmer, not explosive, but deep and steady, a quiet fury at how easy it was for the world to look away. He crouched near her, careful, noticing how she turned her head slightly toward the sound of his footsteps, shoulders tensing. Her fear was subtle but unmistakable, the learned caution of someone who had been hurt before. Ryan's thoughts raced, memories colliding, hospital hallways, the sterile smell of loss, the day he had realized no one was coming to save him either. Yet somehow, he had survived. And now, here was someone else balanced on the edge of something worse. Time stretched strangely, the sun inching higher as if indifferent to human suffering. Ryan became aware of his own reflection in the bus shelter glass, a man worn thin, eyes rimmed with exhaustion, hands rough from labor. He wondered what example he was setting for Mara if he drove away. He wondered how many times someone had driven past him when he'd needed help and how deeply that had scarred him. As he stayed, the girl's breathing gradually slowed. Her presence seemed to draw out something raw in him, something he had buried beneath responsibility and routine. He noticed a small bruise on her arm, half hidden, the yellowed edge of something older than yesterday. It told a story without words, one of abandonment that went far beyond a missed bus. Ryan's mind filled in possibilities he didn't want to consider. He imagined someone bringing her here with promises that dissolved the moment they were no longer convenient. The thought made his stomach churn. He had once promised his wife he would always protect their family, and when she died, that promise had shattered, leaving him grasping at fragments. Maybe this was a chance to pick one piece back up. The afternoon light shifted, clouds drifting lazily, casting brief shadows that cooled the air. Ryan became acutely aware of how small choices could tilt entire lives. He thought of Mara again, of her drawings taped crookedly on the fridge, of the way she watched him when she thought he wasn't looking, learning what kind of person he was becoming without her mother. Something unexpected happened then, not a dramatic revelation, but a quiet unraveling. Ryan noticed a thin hospital bracelet still wrapped around the girl's wrist, the plastic yellowed but intact. His chest tightened as recognition dawned, not of the girl herself, but of the place. He had spent weeks in that same hospital after the accident, sleeping in waiting room chairs, learning how fragile life could be. The bracelet meant she hadn't just been left at a bus stop, she had been discharged into nowhere. The truth settled heavily, she wasn't waiting for a bus. She was waiting because she had nowhere else to go. Ryan felt himself break in a way he hadn't allowed since the funeral. The tears didn't come, but something inside him cracked open, letting empathy flood through the spaces grief had hollowed out. He realized how close he had come, countless times, to being just as lost, how easily he could have slipped through the cracks if not for sheer stubborn love for his daughter. He stayed longer than he intended, the sun now beginning its slow descent, shadows lengthening. The girl's presence was no longer just an image of tragedy, it was a mirror reflecting his own survival. The air buzzed with cicadas, a reminder that life, relentless and indifferent, kept moving. As events unfolded, Ryan found himself making a decision that scared him more than any bill or late night ever had. It wasn't heroic or grand, it was quiet, practical, born from exhaustion and hope tangled together. He didn't know what the future would look like, only that leaving her there would haunt him far more than whatever challenges lay ahead. If this story has touched your heart so far, please take a moment to support it. Your likes, shares, and subscriptions help stories like this reach others who might need them. The day deepened into a warm afternoon glow, and the bus stop no longer felt like a place of abandonment but a turning point, an intersection of broken paths beginning to align. Ryan imagined explaining everything to Mara later, imagined her wide eyes, the way she would understand more than he expected. Children always did. Before the final moments unfold, take a second to comment below and share what this story made you feel. Your words matter more than you think. The truth that finally stunned Ryan wasn't just about the girl's past, it was about his own future. In choosing not to walk away, he discovered that the love he thought he'd lost with his wife hadn't vanished, it had transformed, waiting patiently for a place to land. Under the open sky, in the plain light of day, two abandoned souls found the beginning of something neither had dared hope for. And sometimes, that's all redemption is, not a miracle, but the decision to stop, to see, and to stay. Ryan didn't realize how long he had been standing there until the sun shifted again and the heat softened, the kind of late afternoon light that made everything look fragile and temporary. The bus stop no longer felt like a place people passed through, it felt like a wound left open in the middle of the city. The girl's presence weighed on him, not like a burden, but like responsibility rediscovered after years of numb survival. He guided her carefully toward the van, every movement deliberate, aware that trust, once broken, never came back easily. She followed the sound of his breathing, the subtle cues in the air, her world constructed from fragments most people ignored. Ryan noticed how tense she remained, as if expecting at any moment to be abandoned again. That tension hit him harder than any accusation could have. It reminded him of Mara during the months after her mother's death, how she would wake in the night just to check if he was still there. The ride was quiet, filled with the hum of the engine and the distant noise of traffic. Ryan kept glancing at the rearview mirror, half expecting the girl to disappear like a mirage born of exhaustion. But she remained, hands folded, posture guarded, breathing steady but shallow. The city outside the windows shifted from cracked sidewalks to modest neighborhoods, houses lined with tired trees and laundry fluttering in the breeze. Daylight poured in, illuminating everything, as if refusing to let this story hide in shadows. As they drove, Ryan's mind replayed moments from his own past, his wife's laugh, the smell of her hair after work, the way she had believed people were mostly good even when life proved otherwise. He had lost that belief somewhere between hospital bills and lonely dinners. Yet here he was, acting on it without fully understanding why. When they reached his small house, the girl hesitated at the threshold. The home was nothing special, peeling paint, a narrow porch, toys scattered near the steps, but it was alive. The sound of a child's voice drifted from inside, light and unguarded. That sound made the girl's fingers curl slightly, a reflex of longing she probably didn't even realize she'd shown. Mara burst onto the porch, her face lighting up at the sight of her father, then freezing in confusion as she noticed the stranger. Ryan watched the moment carefully, his heart pounding. He saw curiosity replace confusion, empathy flicker in his daughter's eyes, untainted by the caution adults learn too early. In that instant, he understood something important. Whatever fear he carried about doing the wrong thing, Mara would learn from his courage far more than from his mistakes. Inside, the house smelled faintly of soap and leftover lunch. Sunlight streamed through the windows, catching dust motes in the air, turning them into tiny galaxies. The girl paused, listening, absorbing the unfamiliar space. Ryan realized how overwhelming this must be for her. New sounds, new echoes, a world reshaped again without warning. He felt guilt twist in his chest, but also determination. He had already crossed a line. There was no turning back now. Hours passed in a strange, suspended calm. The girl remained mostly silent, but her presence slowly softened, like ice melting without anyone noticing. Ryan learned small things through observation, the way she oriented herself by sound, how she counted steps unconsciously, how she flinched at sudden movements. Each detail told a story of adaptation and loss, of strength forged through necessity rather than choice. Later, as the day edged toward evening, Ryan finally pieced together more of the truth. It came not through words but through documents tucked inside a worn bag, hospital discharge papers, social service forms, addresses crossed out in pen. The story they told was brutal in its simplicity. No family willing to claim her. No shelter prepared to take someone with her needs. She had been placed at the bus stop with instructions she could not follow alone. The realization stunned Ryan into stillness. This wasn't just neglect, it was systemic abandonment, quiet and legal and devastating. He thought of all the times he had cursed institutions for failing him after his wife's death, for reducing grief to paperwork. He had survived because he had something to anchor him. This girl had been cut loose entirely. That night, as the sky deepened into blue and the sounds of the neighborhood softened, Ryan sat alone at the kitchen table, head in his hands. Fear finally caught up to him. Fear of money, of responsibility, of what this decision might cost his daughter. He felt himself unravel, the careful balance he'd maintained for years threatening to collapse. For the first time since becoming a single father, he allowed himself to imagine failing, not just himself, but two lives instead of one. Yet beneath that fear was something else, something stubborn and warm. Purpose. The kind he had lost when grief narrowed his world to survival. Helping her wouldn't fix everything, but it mattered. It mattered in a way bills and routines never could. Over the following days, the house adjusted around her presence. Daylight became their constant companion, mornings filled with the smell of toast and the sound of birds, afternoons spent navigating small victories and quiet setbacks. Mara adapted quickly, her laughter returning to corners of the house that had gone silent. The girl, once rigid with fear, began to relax, her shoulders lowering, her breathing deepening as safety slowly became real. Ryan watched it all unfold with awe and humility. He understood now that love didn't always arrive with certainty or permission. Sometimes it appeared uninvited, demanding space in lives already stretched thin. And sometimes, accepting it was the bravest thing a person could do. The truth that had stunned him at the bus stop continued to echo in new ways. He saw how close society came, every day, to losing people like her entirely. He saw how easily he himself could have driven past, preserving his fragile stability at the cost of his humanity. That knowledge stayed with him, heavy but clarifying. On one bright afternoon, as sunlight spilled across the living room floor, Ryan realized something profound. The girl was no longer just someone he had rescued, she was someone who had rescued him too. She had cracked open the shell he'd built around his heart, reminding him that pain shared didn't double, it transformed. Life didn't become perfect. Money remained tight. Questions loomed. But the house felt fuller, warmer, anchored by something deeper than routine. Ryan understood now that family wasn't defined solely by blood or plans. Sometimes, it was defined by who stayed when the world walked away.